This is Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and the ThinkPad Yoga is back. Originally, this was just called the ThinkPad Yoga, this line, the 12.5-inch ThinkPad Yoga that started all bringing business ultrabooks into the yoga design. Then there was what Lenovo called the ThinkPad Yoga 12, which was, they went through it, second generation. Now we have the ThinkPad Yoga 260. Lenovo has switched to the naming, so the 12-inch is the 260, the 14-inch will be the 460. Now they announced that months ago, and it took a while for it to happen. In fact, in the United States, Best Buy is still selling the ThinkPad Yoga 460 as the ThinkPad Yoga 14, so it gets really confusing. Anyway, this is the 12-inch model. Let's hope it just stays being called the ThinkPad Yoga 260. Intel Skylake 6th generation inside, and of course it has the yoga hinge. It does all the things that you would expect from a yoga machine. Presentation mode, you got your tent mode, you got tablet mode. It's 2.9 pounds, so it's actually not too bad to use as a tablet, and very light as a laptop. And one neat thing about this is it has a little pen built in. Now we saw this first with the Lenovo ThinkPad X1 Yoga, which is a more expensive 14-inch convertible ultrabook. The super thin one, the aspirational, the nearly $2,000 when you configure it nicely. So this guy happens to be more affordable. Wacom AES digitizer inside. So it comes with this little pen. There's a bigger pen. We'll talk about that. So for you note takers and you artists, you get pressure sensitivity here, you get palm rejection, all that sort of thing. We're going to look at it now. So here it is, the latest edition of the 12.5-inch Yoga. As you can see, it's in that Lenovo sort of way, that pleasing black rectangle. It's pretty darn light and thin. It is 0.7 inches thick. It weighs 2.9 pounds. It's available with Core i3, i5, and i7 Skylake Intel 6th generation CPUs. Anything from 4 to 16 gigs of RAM, 8 in the middle, are available, and you can get it with, they're all M.2 SSDs. You can get it with 128, 256 gig SSDs, and there is a PCIe NVMe high-speed option for those of you who have the bucks to spend and really appreciate fast storage. The base model is around $1,000. That's a Core i3, 4 gigs of RAM, 128 gig SSD, and a 1366 by 768 display. Yes, they do still exist. Touchscreen, supports the Wacom AES pen. And there's a 1920 by 1080. That's a full HD option, also supporting the pen and supporting touch. That's the unit that we have in for review. Standard things you'd expect are the backlit keyboard, which you can see right there. The backlighting was on, activated with the FN button, as you'd expect. A healthy selection of ports, one Link Plus dock support as well. Sorry, no Thunderbolt 3 going on here. Our nicely configured model, but not top of the line, is $1,400. So this is not a cheap machine that gets you a Core i5, 8 gigs of RAM, a 256 gig SSD, and that full HD display. As you'd expect from a Lenovo, it is durable, it is rugged, and the bottom is removable, granting access to the internals, and we'll show you the upgradable internals when we talk about horsepower and performance in some detail coming up. This is a 360-degree hinge machine, as I mentioned, which means you can use this in laptop presentation and tent modes. And in all cases, you get the new Wacom AES pen. That's the same thing we reviewed in the Lenovo ThinkPad X1 Yoga, the new high-end 14-inch model. Pen lives in a little silo, and it's very, very good. I don't think anybody's going to miss the EMR that much. Some artists might, but we'll cover some drawing and some writing so you can see what that's like, too. All right, so you've had a look-see around the device in a variety of settings. Let's take a close look at it now. It's quite slim and it's quite light. Every generation of this does get slimmer and lighter. Yet it feels durable in that ThinkPad sort of way where oh my, that doesn't matter. It's just really not going to hurt it. These guys are pretty durable. Now, in terms of ports and controls, we have, as usual, the power button and the volume controls are on the side. There's also volume controls on the keyboard. This is in case you're using it in tablet mode and the keyboard is not accessible. And here we have the new removable pen. That's where it lives. And this has two little electrical contacts on it, just like we saw in the X1 Yoga. That's because this pen is actually an active pen. With the old Wacom EMR digitizers, the digitizer supplied the trace amount of power that's required for it to work. This, like Entrig, the pen supplies the power. So this gets recharged when it lives in the silo here, and it takes very little time to charge it, and it takes very little power to actually use it. So combo headphone jack right here. SIM card slots for the optional LTE modem. We got our USB 3.0 port, HDMI, the lock slot on this side. And on this side here, we have another USB 3.0 port, mini display port. Always good to have if you have a higher resolution display. The new OneLink Plus dock connector. So no Thunderbolt 3 here, like I said, but you do at least have that dock to fall back on. It's $179. That gives you display out via mini display port. It gives you USB ports, all that sort of stuff. So functionally, it does a lot of the same stuff other than a potential for an external graphics amplifier that Thunderbolt 3 would do. And honestly, this is not the kind of thing you'd be hooking up to a graphics amplifier and play games. This is a portable business laptop. And that's where the charger goes right there. On the bottom, lots and lots of ventilation for a dual-core 15-watt Ultrabook. This is a surprising amount of ventilation. Now, when we push it sort of hard, not even super hard, I was drawing in Clip Studio Paint for about 20 minutes or so, and it gets pretty warm in this section. Not burning hot, but you will feel some heat right over here. Phillips head screws hold on the bottom. It's pretty easy to remove. There's no vicious plastic clips that hold on tenaciously. And we'll show you the internals in just a moment. And what it has is an M.2 SSD slot. And all the models except for the top of the line option use a SATA 3 interface in that M.2 slot. The top of the line, you can get a NVMe SSD in here, as PCIe interface, and you know, if you do a lot of file transfers, you're going to notice a difference. Otherwise, I would save your money and put it into something else. There is a RAM slot in this, very nice to have, so you can get this with 4, 8, or 16 gigs, and Lenovo actually will sell it with a 16 gig DIMM. Previously, you had to go hunt down intelligent memory modules to do that, but they're becoming more widely available, and something we haven't seen much of is DDR4, and this has DDR4 RAM. It has a Samsung RAM module in our unit. Also, the usual Intel Wi-Fi 8260 AC latest generation wireless card is in here, and it is socketed as well. Of course, the battery, if you take the bottom off, you can service it and take it out, but there's no quick release latch. There's no external clip-on battery like we've seen on some of Lenovo's non-Yoga ThinkPad models. Now, these two hinges, they're very robust, and they're pretty much the same thing Lenovo has been using for a couple of generations. Call them tried and true. They're stiff. There's not a lot of weeble wobble going on here. If I do something like that, you know, all of these will bounce a little bit. That's the nature, but that is not much. And it doesn't do a gentle, falling down, you know, which would drive you crazy. So fairly stiff there. It's not the pretty watch band hinge that we see on the consumer yogas, but that is okay. This is a business model. It's not trying to be pretty. Of course, another thing that Lenovo does with the ThinkPad Yoga models, not with the consumer ones, is the lift and lock keyboard. So what happens here, the keyboard is actually not moving, it's the surround around the keyboard. So watch the action there. You can see how it is raising up, so it becomes flush, the bezel around the keys with the keys, and they lock. So for those of you who hate the feeling of loosey-goosey squiggly keys against your leg, you're not going to have that here. The trackpad will still click, but it doesn't register any inputs when you have it in anything other than laptop position, so you don't have to worry about it, but you will feel that. That's the only thing that's kind of a little bit weird. While we're looking at this keyboard right here, you got the usual backlighting control with the FN plus the space bar right there. And lovely keyboard. It's hard to really do better than a ThinkPad keyboard, honestly. You have a lot of key travel here. You can see the relief right there. Nice key weighting, nice resistance. It's just awesome to type on. Sculpted keys. The usual story with a ThinkPad keyboard. And this one isn't like so skinny that they've had to compromise key travel. It's good. The trackpad is a Synaptics trackpad right there with the eraser stick pointer or the nav point for those of you who like that. And that has dedicated buttons. The trackpad itself obviously does not. And it's a pretty good trackpad. And typical of Lenovo, you actually get settings. So those of you who hate the new Windows 10 Microsoft signature style trackpads with absolutely no software, this Synaptics trackpad has settings you can see here for tapping, for clicking, for dragging, multi-finger gestures, and your advanced stuff right there. And also you can enable and disable the track point in the main section of the control panel. So all good stuff there. The only thing that I've never been fond of with the ThinkPad trackpad is its tendency to do the drag kind of weird and kind of accelerate the motion, so sometimes you over drag things a little bit. But minor complaint there, good trackpad overall. Now, interacting with the computer is great using the trackpad, but one of the reasons you probably bought this is because of this pen. Now, this pen is a teeny little toothpick of a thing, isn't it? So if you think you're going to get all hand crampy and this is just not your cup of tea, optionally, Lenovo sells the $40 ThinkPad Pen Pro right here, and so you can see it, and so you can see the part number even there, because before ThinkPad always came with Wacom EMR digitizers. That's electromagnetic. Now we're using a different kind. It's electrostatic. So this is what that pen looks like in the flesh. Nice, meaty. It doesn't have an eraser at the end like Surface. Sorry about that, but you do get your two buttons here. This one is a lot more comfortable. They work pretty much functionally the same, but so here's your other option. Personally, I would pick up one of these, even though the chances are you might lose it, but at least it has a little nerd clip so you can clip it onto your shirt if you still have a front pocket. And as an added bonus, in case you don't have a pocket protector, it comes with yonder little rubbery piece right here. See, this looks like a USB thing? That's because it is. So you can stick this into the USB port of the computer and carry it around by clipping it into the USB port. So if we unplug our little mouse right here and stick that in there, it's just a holder for it. So bravo, it's a simple solution to what used to seem like a complex problem. So there are two display options. There is the paltry 1366 by 768 display that no doubt corporations will buy for their poor employees who are going to be looking at fairly low resolution displays. And that has the same anti-glare finish as this. It supports touch. It supports this pen right here. We have the 1920 by 1080 display. That's the higher end option. Still has the anti-glare finish. It is IPS. Lenovo claims 300 nits of brightness, which is pretty decently bright, and ours measured 344 nits. Very, very bright. Viewing angles being IPS are pretty good on this. The anti-glare coating is modestly effective. It's not super duper. You can probably see some glare happening right there. In terms of color saturation, this poor thing is not so great. Now, it looks fine if you're looking at a web page, and it's reasonably sharp, and I think 1920 by 1080 is plenty enough resolution for 12.5 inches. But the colors are a bit muted looking, and that's because we're looking at only 68% of sRGB. Other competing products in the $1,000 up, and again, this one is priced at about $1,400, they would have 99% or 100% of sRGB. So we're only looking at 68%. And for Adobe RGB, it is only 53%. So for you graphics professionals who are thinking about buying this for photo editing, not going to be the product for you. And video editing likewise. Anytime that you have to really care about color accuracy, this guy is going to fall flat just a bit. Now, in terms of performance, this benchmarks pretty much where we would expect a 6th generation dual-core Intel Skylake CPU to benchmark. Again, Core i5 here, 8 gigs of RAM. The RAM shouldn't matter much for benchmarks. And the standard SATA 3 interface, M.2 SSD. Ours is a 256 gig model. This is our Geekbench 3, and this depends on the CPU. It doesn't really care about much of anything else. We have Intel HD 520 graphics. There's no Iris graphics option here, so this is pretty much par for the course, the scores that you're seeing in Geekbench 3. For W Prime, it computed pi in 19 seconds, which is, again, pretty much standard stuff for a Core i5. And for PC Mark 8, the home accelerated test, you can see it scored 2826. Again, pretty much par for the course among its competitors. It's strong enough to be your everyday computer, depending on what you do. If you're a CAD jockey, not so much. But if you're the usual person who does office, web streaming, video, photo editing, occasional video editing, even a little bit more than occasional video editing, it's fine for that. It gets the job done just fine. So how about audio levels? We're going to play one of our videos so you can hear the speakers, and here's the spoiler. Very thin, very tinny. You do get a Dolby audio control panel. You can play with your settings some. It always sounded a little thin to me. The same goodness inside, and yeah, you can see here, obviously we have the so here we have it at 80% volume. For the price. For my taste, it's a little bring it down to 40. Pretty quiet there. Now, actually, it looks pretty decent watching this video, visually speaking, but the speakers, thin, tinny, not awesome. I mean, again, it's a business machine. It's not geared towards multimedia-loving consumers, though some consumers, of course, will buy this, but that's what it is. Happily, heat and noise are pretty well controlled. Like I said, the bottom, there is one hot spot. The fan will come on and it will cause some breezing along the back edge over there. And otherwise, it doesn't really interfere with something like watching video ever, the fans on this. Okay, so how does the Wacom AES do for writing and drawing? Well, pretty much the same as it did on the Lenovo ThinkPad X1 Yoga that we reviewed. No surprise there. I'm using the bigger pen here because I find it more comfortable. Functionally, they actually work very similarly. 2048 levels of pressure sensitivity. This one has a quadruple A battery inside, just like N-Trig pens do on Surface. We have palm rejection here. I can rest my hand on the screen, and notice it did move for a minute, but now that it's seen the pen tip, it's working just fine. Pressure sensitivity is very nice. Light line, heavy line. So right now I'm using a charcoal, and I want to shade in his cheek a little bit more, make him look a little bit darker and more mysterious. So I've got the control to do that. Pen tip offset is just about nil, otherwise known as parallax, and that's very nice and precise. And if I want to shade in the hair. Now, in terms of tracking, let's switch to a pencil so you can see right here that the tracking is very good on this. I'm not the world's best slow diagonal line drawer, but there is jitter here. Now, if you go quickly, of course, it's nice and smooth, but I find that plenty workable because I very rarely creep along and do a very long line like that. You know how you work best, but I find this very pleasant, very usable in terms of the pressure curves. I like it a lot, and it's very quick and very responsive. I would like even a little bit better palm rejection, but this is where the technology is, whether you're talking about Wacom AES or you're talking about N-Trig right now. This is one of the few places where the Apple iPad Pro Pencil still has a little bit of a lead there. I know some of you are going to hate that I said that, but I use these to draw all the time, and that's the way it is. Of course, you can use this in OneNote, no problem. You can take notes. It keeps up just fine. So for those of you who need to diagram, do equations, use OneNote, use handwriting to text recognition, it all works here, and it works very, very nicely. Like it a lot. So how about battery life? Lenovo claims up to 10 hours battery life. Like most manufacturers, these things are true only in somebody's dream running at 0% brightness, I suppose. Running this at 40% brightness, which is plenty bright enough because it is a very bright display, and doing our usual test, which is a mixed productivity test, Office, web, email, social networking, and streaming an hour episode on Netflix. This averages 7.5 hours, which isn't bad. 7.5 hours of battery life, not stellar. It's a 44 watt-hour 4-cell battery that's inside. It ships with Lenovo's compact 45 watt charger.